So next we have Team Aura, which is a conversational AI tool that helps journalists research topics. So it's a collaboration between Danish Broadcast Corporation from Denmark, Indian Express from India, The Economist from the UK, and Aftonbladet from Sweden. So to talk about their project, we have with us Aida from the DR and Alok from The Economist. So I'm going to hand it over to them to take it away.
Thank you, Lakshmi, and hello, everyone. I hope it's been going really well so far today. Yes, I'm Alok Jha from The Economist. I'm here to talk to you about Aura with my colleague, Aida, who will introduce herself in just a moment. So Aida's going to control the presentation. So she's going to be moving things forward while I talk. So let me give you a bit of background. I'm a journalist at The Economist. I write about science and technology. And one of the things I have to do all the time is to work out whether something's a story or not, which is, I'm sure, very familiar to all of you from lots of sources of information. And so the tool we built today is for reporters and news editors, really, to speed up the initial part of their research to work out whether something is worth covering or not. And this is as the slide shows, this is a really important question for everyone. Should we cover a story? Now, imagine if you're a journalist and you've been asked to write a story about, I don't know, something very specific, like the latest in the conservation status of beetles or dung beetles or something like this, which is something that happens to me quite often. It has happened to me recently. So the question is, do you know enough about the context of this story to work out whether it's something we should cover or not? As a small story, big story, whatever. You might have a scientific paper, you might have the transcript of a press release or a press conference or something else. Now, what I would normally do if I was a news editor is go to my specialist science reporter or conservation reporter and say, look at this paper, people seem to be interested in it, should we cover it? And what a specialist journalist has in their brain already is lots of context. They would know already, or they'd be able to work out very quickly the context, what's actually new in this development? What can we say to add to the coverage? What could we as our organization add to the reader's information? And that would all feed into the advice that I as an editor would make about whether we should go ahead and actually report the story, which might take some time. Another thing that a specialist journalist would do is to draw up a list of potential storylines and angles, maybe some interviewees, maybe people who don't agree with the storyline you're going with, so that you've got the full rounded picture. And all of this could take several hours per particular news lead, maybe even a day of actual pre-research. And the idea of our tool, Aura, is to try and automate some of that process, that initial process, which sometimes can be a waste of time if you decide not to cover a story. So users would be able to upload a file. So again, let's say a journal paper or a press release or whatever else. They would put it into the LLM, and the LLM would come back with a few storylines. These are things that it thinks you might be interested in. You would pick a storyline. You might even be able to customize it slightly, as we'll show you in a minute. Then you pick one of the storylines, and the LLM then takes that storyline and the context and sends it to another tool that has been developed by colleagues of ours at Stanford University called Storm. And what Storm does is searches the internet for relevant articles, information, useful background, contacts, etc., and then puts together a research report for you, a sort of Wikipedia-style research report with references to then allow you to then go off and do the reporting. Bear in mind, the tool we built is for reporters to help them do their own reporting. It's not to replace anything. So Aida, over to you to show us how this tool works.
Thank you. So we took all of that and created Aura to assist journalists in two key areas: generating story ideas and creating search reports. Now let's explore the first phase by uploading a scientific paper with the straightforward title, Economic Value of Dung Removal by Dung Beetle in US Subtropical Pastures. As you can see, Aura has generated 3 storylines. The first one suggests writing about beetles not only collecting dung, but also dollars. Each storyline comes with a title, a subtitle, and pitch that's ready for an editor. You'll also notice a description of the story type along with its newsworthiness criteria. And now let's scroll all the way down and pretend we are not entirely satisfied with these storylines. So let's demand a different perspective. We now have new storylines, also including use cases. Before we jump into how we develop these storylines, let's hear from you, Alok. As an editor, you see pitches like these all the time. So what are your thoughts on Aura's storylines?
So I thought what was interesting was the first set of storylines were good, but look, as with any pitches from a reporter, you often don't get exactly the kind of target you want. So you always go back to them and say, this is interesting, but have you thought about it this way, or have you thought about it that way? And I think that when you in the example put add a global context, which is what we would always do at The Economist, because we're a global newspaper, we always want a global context. I can see already that although the first storylines were decent, the second ones are much better. I mean, if we scroll down to these ones, and I've seen these ones already, if we scroll down and continue with the demonstration, you'll see that the actually one of them is a storyline that we actually ended up commissioning at The Economist a while ago, based on a very similar paper. So it's actually quite impressive that it's found a storyline that we are actually interested in and we would commission.
So when we started with the basic prompt, but even with a solid data model, the results were too generic and abstract, filled with science terminology only Alok and scientists understood. So we used published articles from The Economist with pitches and titles based on scientific papers as assistant prompts, and voila. The pitches were evaluated by extracting elements from the original human-made pitch and comparing them to those generated by Aura. And the results have been consistently strong. So now we will go to the part 2. Here we will select one of the storylines and create a research report. Here the journalist can edit the storyline, but we'll just continue with this one. And we can click on all the boxes to see what was selected and how Aura conducted the research. Here we see that the LLM expert personas are created dynamically to fit each storyline. If the story was about, let's say, nuclear fusion, we would not get an entomologist. So these personas are now ready to receive real-time information to shape the report. And let's see how that works. So each persona is asked relevant questions by the LLM journalist. And as you can see, they will skip answering to reduce hallucinations. Now let's take a look at the final report. So first we have a summary, followed by consigns section that are easy to navigate using the left sidebar. And here we also find information on references, all of which are clickable. We can also download the report, perhaps to share with others, and still enjoy the clickable references. So this is the architecture. Now I could go all day about the beauty of this architecture, but I'll spare you all the juicy details. What's important to know is that the first 2 phases focus on the storyline creation, and the last one is dedicated to the research report. To make this happen, we've used OpenAI models, the Quadrant database, RAG processes, Bing Search, and even partnered with Stanford University for the research magic. If you have any questions, we are ready to answer them after Alok presents our vision for the future features.
So thank you, Aida. So as Aida demonstrated, we managed to make this tool which does all this early research. And just to underline the point that by itself, from that paper that we showed you an example of, it found a story that I definitely would have commissioned. In fact, I did commission from a human reporter who had done all of this work as well. So it's pretty good at finding storylines. So when we started this tool, it was meant for news editors to be able to work out very quickly whether they should cover something by getting lots of context, basically having a specialist journalist in your pocket. But actually, in doing all of this, there's a couple of things that we realized, which is that actually for a reporter who has to find stories for themselves and do all this pre-research to then prepare a pitch for an editor, this could be incredibly useful as it is, and could provide context, useful context, to a whole bunch of leads that they might have very quickly, rather than that person spending 2 or 3 days searching through papers and doing all this stuff and maybe coming up with nothing. They could do all of it in just a morning and work out which of the papers they can then go off and find more information about. So I think as it is still very useful. It can be refined. I think for an editor, a couple of things we would like to do to refine it further, which is that the research report is a maximal version. And I think we need a shorter, more succinct version, which could be more easy to read very quickly. We could even turn it into a podcast, one of those conversational podcasts from Notebook LM, depending on what people want. However people want to consume it. I think that the fact is we've got this information, now we need to think about the best way to give it to news editors. That's one way to improve it. Another way to improve it is I would like very clearly to have a list of people to speak to and their phone numbers or email addresses, which I think we can do based upon the inputs we give it. So people who to speak to about who to speak to about the initial paper, who are the sort of dissenters, other interesting people to speak to based on information we have. And also, I think that as you use this tool more in a newsroom, it should learn more about the kinds of things you report and kind of things that you have covered in the past. It should know those things. When it comes along with another Dung Beetle paper in the future, it can say, "Ah, you covered this 6 months ago. You did this, and this is what's interesting about it now," like a proper specialist journalist. So those are things we'd like to do with it, which are all doable, I think. But the bare bones of it are pretty fantastic, I think. And so over to Ida, but anything over to questions for you for anything else you would like for us to improve.
And this is our beautiful team.
Of course, yeah, our team. Ida, please.
Yeah, so we have had pleasures of working with Vivek Arya, which is the Chief Product Manager from India, and also with Martin Shori, who is Director of Innovation, and he's from Sweden. And of course, Alok, you have met. Then we have Christian Kumar on the technical side of the team. He is a Chief Manager specializing in AM, ML tech. You also have me. I am a journalist and a project manager. And we also have Tapsim Dwencher, which is Senior Data Scientist at The Economist.
Amazing, amazing work. Thank you, Aida and Alok. So if you have questions for them, please use the Q&A functionality. I know there are some questions in here already. So Alok and Aida, if you don't mind, I'll start asking you those questions, with starting with Phil Clark, who has a question for Alok, something you've alluded to earlier, but if you could tell him how much time does this tool save for you when you've used it?
So I think that I can only give you a theoretical answer to this because I haven't used it live. I've only used it in a test environment. And so, to prepare a report along the lines of the one that you saw in the demonstration, if I was doing it properly, it would take at least a day to do that or more. And I definitely wouldn't have written it in a narrative style. It would just be notes and papers and links, which then I would have to sort of think about. Now, this is how we journalists do it all the time, right? And it's fine. That's how we normally do it. But actually, having something that just puts everything into one place, which you can then edit, think about, maybe even iterate. Maybe it finds links that you wouldn't have searched otherwise. I'm thinking of the order of a day it would save you. And bear in mind, you might do this work and decide it's not a story you want to cover. So if you're doing this for multiple papers, that's several days of work. Now, as a journalist who gets more experienced, you get better at deciding very early on in the research whether you want to cover something or not. But actually, you could almost industrialize your sort of searching of stories this way, I think. I'm maybe speaking too far in advance, but it could save a lot of time.
Great, thanks, Alok. The next question is from Duncan. Have you done any Q&A on the research citations? Are they accurate? Any evidence of hallucinations?
Yes, we have been testing it extensively, actually, and it has not been providing any hallucinations, or we have been validating it through all of the process. But for me, as a journalist, but also working within the technical sphere, I don't think that we should dedicate the validation processes to any type of tool. I think this is still our own, as a journalist, a very dedicated task to make sure that whatever we take, it is also validated and verified by ourselves.
Thanks, Aida.
Yeah, and can I just make a point also? This is a tool to help journalists do their own work. We're not outsourcing the fact checking and the reporting. This is just, here's all information you might want to start with. Off you go, you do your own reporting.
Perfect. Thanks, Alok and Aida. The next question is from Yara, who says, it looks very interesting and useful, but what is the difference between doing it with a prompt on ChatGPT or Claude versus Aura? If I build a persona on the chat and ask for a pitch, I think it will look the same. So do you have any response to that?
It will.
A non-technical response, and then Ida can give you a much better response, basically. I've tried what you're suggesting, which is to get pitches from Gemini, and it's taken me multiple hours, and they've all been terrible. I've really tried very hard, giving it papers, specific prompts with angles from articles I've written before, and it just doesn't do it. It's very generic. It's very and it comes up with all sorts of made-up facts. We specifically want this tool to be based on only information that we allow it to search. At the moment, it searches the whole web, but we're going to specify only trusted information. We give it, we train it on articles we've written before, so that it knows the kinds of things we write. So I think it's much better. Ida.
So from the technical aspect of it, as we have mentioned before, even though if you, for example, should insert this kind of paper and create a persona on ChatGPT, it will not work the same way, because we have a very solid data model that is backing everything up. So from newsworthiness to angles, and to be very specific and very focused in this kind of journalistic way that you can just pick it up and take it. And also we have trained it on real pitches, so it knows how to narrow it down. It knows how to be specific on journalistic angles, and it also knows how this should look like. So it is definitely not the same.
Thanks, Aida. And I think that's an important takeaway for most of the projects, or all of the projects in today's fellowship. It's that it's very newsroom and context specific that you're building all of these tools. So that's something important to keep in mind. The next question is from Vish Patil. What is the format or style sheet that you have adapted for the LLM responses? How many sources does it refer? What if the source is behind a paywall? Is there a way to add specific sources for references?
So there is actually a possibility to add different sources. This is what the Economist also will do, I believe, from Aura. So you can also add, imagine if you add your entire archive of the newsroom, that would enhance the pitches like multiply 100 times. You can also specify it, because it has already been specified what sites not to look at, because some of these are perhaps some kind of mis or disinformation, but you can specify it further. And the information that it is getting, it is information that where the robots, so to say, are allowed to enter. So you are not breaking any kind of rules using this tool.
Thanks, Aida. Hussam asks, how do you ensure your persona does not hallucinate? Do you have something more to add to this?
I think I have added this shortly, because all of the collected information, what we have collected on the online and from the scientific paper, these are the basal foundation for all information when they are getting information. And if information is not there, the persona will say, sorry, I do not know the answer to this question. So maybe you will not get some kind of maybe needed information, but this is better than to let it hallucinate.
Perfect. And next is from Line, who says, does Aura support other languages other than English, Arabic being the language of interest for my organization, for example?
It totally could.
Not,
It totally
not
could.
yet.
Not yet, but it totally could. I
Why
mean,
not?
this is for all organizations and all the different nations to take in and just to adjust it to their own language, and then it can do.
And Rama asks, how did you train the LLM on your news values?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so I think I've noticed a couple of questions along this line in the Q&A actually. Basically, the initial data model was just an LLM, right? And it came up with, as I just said, generic storylines. And so what I did was to take articles that we've published in The Economist, 10 of them, take the original source paper that we got it from, plus also the pitch that I received from the person who pitched it to me. So it's a paragraph. And all of so that was one bit of data. So we did that multiple times, and Aura was then able to be trained basically to understand what turns a scientific paper into an article and what is it about it. So so it learnt from those, and then it got much better at pitching based on what we wanted.
Yeah, it was totally like it was a surprise to me actually, because we had this very solid data model, but it was surprise to me how little data can do such a huge difference in the output. So yeah.
Thanks, Aida. Thanks, Alok. We have about 4 minutes to take some more questions, so I'm just going to go to the next one from Callum, which is your tool designed to integrate into human-centric workflows, or does it also aim to enable fully AI-generated articles?
I mean, definitely not the latter. I think this is completely for humans to help them report. I mean, look, at the moment, what it does in the end is produce a research report, which is very interesting, but it needs a human to actually understand that. You could try and get an LLM to rewrite it, but it'll be generic and boring, and it will not do any of the things that a journalist does in terms of making it interesting to people. It's about arming you as a journalist with more information from the get-go so that you can do your own reporting and speak to people and just waste a lot less time searching the internet randomly, basically. Just get that. So I don't want to, I don't think this is, and I don't ever want to build a workflow that produces AI-generated articles. It stops here, and then it's up to journalists.
Definitely. And for example, around here in DR, a Danish corporate broadcasting corporation, we do not use such tools. But I know other media organizations, they actually do. So one could try to take the report and insert it in such tool to see what kind of article they produce. But I second Alok.
Okay, we may be able to take 2 more questions. The first one is from Monica, who says it's an impressive system, if slightly terrifying. Are there any guardrails in regards to privacy, especially if names and contact details are added to the data?
Oh, yes.
I would say that, sorry, Annie, go on.
No, go on.
I would say that basically all of the information you see in that research report is public information. It's on websites or places that we're allowed to go. So, you know, it's basically a robot journalist. So if a journalist is able to find that information on the internet, or anyone in fact, then I think that doesn't break any privacy rules. Occasionally, maybe in future versions of this, you might be able to build in systems where it can go behind paywalls. But again, journalists will be able to do those things anyway. It would be because they've allowed you to go behind that paywall. In science, for example, we have access to articles that are not published for weeks on it until next week, a week after, because they want you to cover those articles, and they'll have contact details in there and all sorts. So this would only go to places that a normal journalist would be able to go and give you that information. And none of that report is published online or publicly available. It's a research tool for a journalist desk. So I think that hopefully we're not breaking any rules for publicity or privacy.
We are not. We are definitely not.
not.
And for like me as a investigative journalist, I also work with the sensitive data, and you could maybe imagine how you want to maybe insert some kind of perhaps sensitive data into the tool to maybe extract some kind of pictures just to concise this focus. And the safeguard we have made there is to use, of course, the API calls, so the models are not trained on the data, but I still would be very, very cautious about inserting anything that has very sensitive person data into any tool. So
yeah, agreed.
Thanks, Aida. Thanks, Alok.